You know that feeling. You finally stop. You sit down, and within 60 seconds, something in you is already reaching for the phone, not because you want anything on it, just because being still feels impossible. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not addicted to your screen. You are carrying something that monks in the Egyptian desert were carrying 1600 years ago, before screens, before smartphones, before any of the things we blame. They had a name for it, Acedia, the noonday devil, and they found the cure. Tonight they are going to show you what it is. Let your body find the surface beneath you. Let everything you were gripping today begin, slowly, to release. The thoughts, the unfinished things, the weight of the hours. Set them down here. They will be there in the morning if you need them. The only thing that belongs to this hour is stillness, and the story of the men who chose stillness when everything in them wanted to run. It is the 4th century. The Roman Empire is beginning to fracture at its edges. The cities are loud and crowded and endlessly distracting, noisy with commerce and politics and the particular anxiety of a civilization that can feel itself changing but cannot see what it is changing into. And thousands of men and women made a decision that looked, to everyone around them, like madness. They left. They walked into the Egyptian desert, the Nitrian valley, the wastes of Cetis, the vast burning silence of sand and rock and heat, and they built small stone cells. One room, stone walls, a mat for sleeping, nothing else. And they stayed, not for a retreat, not for a season, forever. They were called the Desert Fathers and Mothers. And they were not running from the world because they hated it. They were running towards something the world could not give them, the unmediated presence of God, available only in the silence that the world was too loud to enter. They went seeking God in the quiet, and in the quiet they discovered something they had not anticipated. The noise had followed them, not external noise. The cities were far behind them, no crowds, no markets, no voices, just silence and heat and the sound of their own breathing. The noise was inside, and it was worse in the silence than it had ever been in the city. Because here is what the Desert Fathers discovered that no productivity guru has ever named correctly. The restlessness does not come from screens. It does not come from dopamine. It does not come from bad habits or broken routines or too much caffeine. It was there in stone cells in the Egyptian desert in the 4th century, settling over men who had no screens, no cities, no distractions of any kind. It has always been there. It is older than the internet by 1600 years. A monk named Evagrius of Pontus was the first to document it with precision. Evagrius was not an ordinary man. He had been trained by the greatest theological minds of his generation, Gregory of Nazianzus, who ordained him deacon, and Basil of Caesarea. He had moved in the highest circles of Constantinople. He was brilliant, socially connected, on the trajectory of a great ecclesiastical career. And he left all of it for a stone cell in the Egyptian desert. He brought his intellectual precision into the silence with him, and what he observed, in himself, in the monks around him, in the particular quality of suffering that the desert produced, he catalogued with the exactness of a physician mapping a condition he had lived from the inside. He called it Acedia, the noonday devil, not as a threat, as a description, a name for something that had been unnamed. This heaviness, this spiritual weather system, arrives like a change in the air, not as an enemy to be fought, but as a condition to be understood, a particular kind of interior darkness that settles over the soul and whispers, with great patience and great persistence, that the life you are living is not the real life. Evagrius writes that the monk finds himself looking out the window again and again, as if drawn there by a gravity he did not choose. Walking to the door, checking the position of the sun, not because he decided to, because the restlessness decided for him, he finds that the day feels like it has 50 hours, that the morning is gone and the evening is still impossibly far away, and nothing has been completed and everything remains. And underneath the restlessness, a quiet but persistent voice. Somewhere else would be better. A different cell, a different monastery, a different life. If you could just change your circumstances, the heaviness would lift. If you could just be somewhere other than exactly where you are, you would finally find peace. Evagrius observed something else about this condition that should stop you completely. It does not only draw the monk toward obviously bad things, it draws him toward visiting the sick, helping a neighbor, going to comfort a friend, not because he cares about them in that moment, but because they are elsewhere, and elsewhere is the point. The restlessness does not care where you go, it only wants you to leave. And then he described something that should make every person alive today stop completely. Does that sound like a 4th century monk? Or does it sound like you, reaching for your phone not for anything specific, just to escape the particular quiet weight of simply being where you are? But here is what Evagrius understood that no one had named before him, and why it lands so close to home. He understood why this heaviness arrives at midday, not morning, not evening, midday. When the day is half gone, and the gap between who you meant to be today and who you actually are is at its widest and most visible. When the initial energy of morning has drained away, and the reward of evening is still too far to see. Midday is when the lie is most convincing. The lie that this moment, this ordinary, unremarkable, uncompleted moment, is not enough. That the real life is waiting for you somewhere else, in some future arrangement of circumstances that will finally make everything feel right. This heaviness gives to every elsewhere the appearance of salvation, and to the present moment the appearance of a prison. This is not medieval superstition. This is a precise description of the experience of being alive in the modern world. Every time you open an app and feel for a moment that other people's lives are more real than yours, that is Acedia. Every time you start a task and immediately feel drawn to do something else, anything else, that is Acedia. Every time you sit down to pray and find your mind has already left the room before you have finished the first sentence, that is Acedia. The Noonday devil has not changed his nature in 1600 years. He has only been given better tools. John Cassian, a contemporary of Evagrius who brought the desert tradition to the West, described the same condition with one devastating observation. The monk, he wrote, cannot bear to be alone with himself. Because to be alone with himself is to be alone with the gap between who he is and who he was made to be. And that gap, in the silence, is not something that can be passed through quickly. 800 years after Evagrius, Thomas Aquinas gave Acedia a definition so precise that no one has improved on it since. 3 words: sorrow at spiritual good, not laziness. Aquinas was careful about this. A person carrying Acedia is rarely lazy. They are often furiously busy, frantically productive, endlessly moving from task to task, screen to screen, distraction to distraction. Laziness is not wanting to do anything. Acedia is wanting to do absolutely anything other than the one thing that is actually in front of you. Sorrow at spiritual good. 3 words that contain everything you have ever felt when the phone was more appealing than the prayer, when the scroll was more appealing than the silence, when anywhere felt better than here, and 3 words that point directly to the cure. The Desert Fathers tried everything against Acedia: more prayer, longer fasting, harder physical labor, stricter discipline. None of it worked directly, because none of it addressed what Acedia actually is. Acedia is not dissolved by doing more. It is dissolved by remaining. A young monk came to the desert to find Abba Moses, one of the great desert fathers of the Egyptian wilderness, a man who had himself once lived outside the law before his conversion, and who became one of the most revered spiritual teachers of his age. The young monk asked him for a word of wisdom. He expected something complex, some advanced practice that would finally give him peace from the restlessness. Abba Moses looked at him and said, "Go, sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything. That is the entire teaching, not a technique, not a program, not a detox or a routine or a method, simply remain." But here is what remaining actually means, and why it is so much gentler and so much more powerful than anything the self-help industry has ever offered. When the heaviness of Acedia settles, when the old familiar pull arises, when the restlessness stirs at the edges, when something in you reaches toward anywhere but here, the Desert Fathers had one invitation: let the wave pass through you. Do not brace against it. Do not reason with it. Do not negotiate with it, or try to think your way clear of it. Simply be still. Rest in your cell. Because what happens on the other side of that stillness, what happens when the wave of Acedia has moved through you and you are still there, still breathing, still present, is what the monks called the gift of the cell. The present moment opens, not because the present moment changed, because you did. The silence that Acedia had been calling unbearable reveals itself as the only place where anything real ever happens. The ordinary moment that had been depicted as insufficient reveals itself as already full, full of the God who has been here all along, waiting for you to stop leaving long enough to notice. The Desert Fathers found that when you rest in the stillness until the restlessness becomes something quieter, something changes. The cell that felt like a prison becomes a sanctuary. The silence that felt like absence becomes presence. This is not metaphor. This is a description of something that happens. Something that monks in stone cells in the Egyptian desert experienced so consistently that they built an entire theology around it. Abba Moses knew it. Evagrius knew it. John Cassian brought it to the Western Church. Thomas Aquinas gave it its precise definition. And every person who has ever simply remained in the discomfort of stillness and not fled has discovered on the other side that the cell was teaching them all along. Your cell will teach you everything, but only if you stay. Here is what the Desert Fathers understood about the nature of this restlessness that no algorithm has ever computed. It is a misdirected hunger. Acedia, from the Greek akidia, meaning lack of care, originally referred to the failure to care for something precious, something entrusted to you, something that required your full attention and presence. What the soul is failing to care for when this heaviness settles is the present moment itself. The present moment is the only place where God is reachable, not the past that is gone, not the future that has not yet arrived, only the present, only here, only now. And Acedia is the specific condition of the soul that cannot remain in the only place where what it is looking for actually lives. The infinite scroll is not the cause of this. The infinite scroll is simply its preferred modern form. Because the infinite scroll is the perfect embodiment of the Noonday Devil's oldest promise. There is always something better one movement away. The next thing will be more satisfying, more real than this. It never is. Because what you are looking for is not in the next thing. It has never been in the next thing. It is here, in the ordinary, quiet, unremarkable, completely sufficient present moment that this heaviness has been lying to you about all your life. And now, right now, in this room, in this particular darkness, you have the same choice that every desert father in the Egyptian wilderness once faced. The pull is here, the restlessness is here, and you can simply be still. If these reflections carry you toward rest, there is more waiting every week. Follow the channel so you don't miss them. 3 things to carry into sleep. The first, the restlessness is not a malfunction. It is the oldest spiritual condition in the history of the Church, documented in stone cells 1600 years before the smartphone, carrying a name, a history, and a cure. You are not broken. You are carrying something that has always been survivable. And on the other side of the stillness, the cell is quiet. The second, the cure is not a technique. It is a posture of remaining. When the old familiar pull arises, when something reaches for the phone, when the mind stirs, when the restlessness moves at the edges, simply be still. Let the wave pass through you. Do not feed it. Do not flee it. Remain. Because on the other side, the cell is waiting to teach you everything it has always known. The third, the present moment is enough. It has always been enough. The greatest lie of Acedia is that the real life is somewhere else. It is not. It is here, in the ordinary quiet of this room, in the unremarkable fact of this breath, in this moment which is already full of the God who has been here all along, waiting for the restlessness to pass so you can finally notice. Let your breathing slow now. Let it become the breathing of someone who has stopped leaving, someone who has decided for this one night to simply remain. The pull may still be there at the edges. That is fine. You do not need to make it stop. You only need to stop feeding it. Let it be there, and breathe, and stay. The desert is quiet, the cell is small, and God is not in the next hour, not in the next thought, not somewhere more interesting or more resolved or more comfortable than this. God is here, in the silence that Acedia calls empty and the desert fathers called full. In the present moment that this heaviness has been calling insufficient and that 1600 years of monks called the only place where anything real ever happens, in this breath, this stillness, this completely sufficient, quietly held, already inhabited now. Go, sit in your cell, and let your cell teach you everything. Sleep now. In the silence the monks chose. Sleep now. On the other side of the restlessness, where the gift has always been waiting. Sleep now, in the present moment, which has always been enough. Good night. Good night. Good night.